Hey everybody, how is it going on this beautiful Wednesday evening? I know where I live, it's kind of cloudy. Looks like it's going to be somewhat rainy. I think it's supposed to be raining here in Phoenix tomorrow and the next day, which anytime it rains out here, I will take it because that does not happen that often. I don't want to jab all of your ears off, so I want to try to make this short, sweet, and simple if that is at all possible. This video, it's something that I really didn't want to have to make. It's a little bit awkward. I think it's kind of childish and silly that I even have to make it, but I feel that I have to because it is pertaining to one of my close and personal friends. And this is how I am with my friends and family. I don't let people steamroll my friends and family after their death because they will have one hell of a fight on their hands with me. And that kind of seems to be the beginning stages of what is possibly occurring. And, just want to make this video to spread the truth and to give some factual information that is not led by emotion, hysteria, theories, and fear. Because that's how my mind thinks. I'm a pretty harsh realist, and that's how I've always been from the time I was a child. I don't sugarcoat things. I don't make up little extra fluffy add-ons to my story to make it sound more exciting or more mysterious. I'm just like one of those it is what it is type of people. So, yes, this video is going to be about Doug. And just to go over one last time, now that time has passed and we all know what happened, and things that played out that I have yet, that I have not really discussed publicly, because it is not the public's business. I don't care what anyone says. I get messages sometimes from people that ask me when I'm going to apologize to the viewers for how I reacted in Doug's chat room. First of all, if you are referring to yourself as a viewer and you are viewing Doug and you're viewing me for viewing purposes, the answer to that question is never. I am never going to apologize to people who view us for viewing pleasure. I have no reason to. I did what anybody would have done for a good friend of theirs, and that is ultimately protect my friend from being eaten alive by vultures and having people go apeshit and hysterical. And again, there were only about 4 of those people who did that. The cult groupies. And I just posted a definition on my community page about what the definition of a cult groupie is. This video is dedicated to Doug's fans and supporters and his friends, because I do know that he had a very stable base of support. He had a lot of support, actually. A lot of supporters. So this is for them. This is not for the cult groupies. This is not for little zippity-doo-dah out there that's making a video crying because she's just so sad that Doug died and she can't believe that a man that she didn't know or even like is dead. And so she's going to project herself and use Doug's name so that people can beg for her to stay and not go away, because it's just so traumatic for her. That's not what this video is for either. So now that we have got that out of the way, once again, this video is for drugs. What a freaking tongue twister, man. Doug's friends, family, and supporters and fans. That is who this is for. And those of you who have seen my videos, I tell it like it is. I do not give trigger warnings in advance because the way I figure it is, if you are a part of the anti-Scientology community, and this is a community of people who have had lots of abuse, we're talking about the subject matters of cults, cultic abuse, things like that. If you're here because you're a goddamn adult and you should be able to talk about these subject matters. So I don't do trigger warnings. I feel like there's no need to, and that's just how I think. It's not my job to coddle people and pat them on the head and make sure that they feel like wonderful and happy about everything. Ain't nobody doing that for me. So anyways, where do I begin? The number one question that I have been seeing lately is, why was this not discussed on SPTV to a greater extent? So why did people not discuss Doug's death on SPTV more than it was? My answer to that is very simple. Why would it be? And I think that people asking that question, it's quite obvious to me you're asking that question because you are very new to the subject matter of Scientology as a whole, and you barely discovered Doug Kramer 6 months ago, and you don't know how he is and his past during the past decade. I also want to remind everybody that SPTV is a really brand new concept. It is like 1 year old, give or take. And when I say give or take, I'm being very generous. I mean, give or take like 2 months. So I'll just be generous and say SPTV is 1 year old. The anti-Scientology movement and people protesting Scientology is like over 40 years old, people. Doug and I met each other around the same time. We come from the same era of protesting within the anti-Scientology community, which is why I am confident enough to make videos about this. Because I knew the man. We had very many discussions. I was on his show, and we talked on the phone an average of once a week. And every time we would talk on the phone, it was a minimum of 3 to 5 hours each time. We had a lot in common with what we were dealing with as far as like watching our parents get older, what Scientology, the damaging effects of like 3+ decades on our parents and what it does, yada, yada, yada. So my answer is, why would SPTV talk about Doug at great length? Many of the people on SPTV did not even know Doug. They never talked to him. And Doug was not an influential factor of their lives. Aaron and Doug were not best friends. They didn't hate each other. They were just, I would say, acquaintances. So with that being said, and, always take a look at it as like your own life, like how you would handle things in your personal life. If you have a YouTube channel and someone passes away that had 0 impact on you and that you didn't know, would you make a big tribute video about their death, and would you spend hours upon hours discussing how important and significant their death is when ultimately their death had no significance or impact on you? I seriously doubt it. I know I wouldn't. So that's basically the answer to your question. Most of the people on SPTV have no reason to discuss Doug because they didn't know him. They didn't watch his show. They didn't know what he was about. And quite frankly, Doug would not have wanted SPTV to make a big hoopla about his death anyways. I know Mark Plummer recently passed away. And Mark Plummer is considered a legendary critic against Scientology, and he's been around for decades. SPTV barely discussed Mark Plummer's death either. So there's really no conspiracy there. I honestly was surprised that Mark Plummer did not get more recognition and publicity after his death, because he was considered one of the top dog critics going back like way before my time. You know, he's considered one of those old guard critics, that sort of thing. You guys need to look at SPTV sort of like, you know, when you see cars driving and they have those yellow ribbons that say, "I support the troops." It's basically just a message of solidarity that you support the troops. It's a logo. That's what SPTV is. And King Aaron himself, as a lot of people seem to think that Aaron is like some king that like rules everybody, which I find very funny. The only people that Aaron rules are like fans of the Aftermath show. Let's say like Aftermath fanatics. When it comes to those of us who were raised in Scientology, I've said this time and time again, those of us, you know, people that he considers his friends, like the second gens, he does not rule us. He does not tell us what to do. He's never told me what to do. You know, we've had a few spats over the years, as I've mentioned before, and that's that. When I think of Scientology and what's going on with it, SPTV is the last thing that even comes to my mind. Like, I don't even think of SPTV. And as long as you guys keep thinking of SPTV and making it a focal point, that's like the most important messenger of Scientology, you're going to keep falling into this trap when something big happens like a death, and then you're going to be sitting there asking yourself, well, why didn't SPTV talk about this? And then you're going to start thinking all these conspiracies that they're just untrue. So I don't know how else to explain it. SPTV had no reason to discuss Doug at great length. He was mentioned briefly. That's fine enough for me, and I'm a good friend of his. I mean, I don't expect some grandiose statement on all of the SPTV channels for everybody to roll out a red carpet and talk about Doug for like 5 months after his death. And it kind of seems like that's what some people want. So hopefully that answers that question. The second part of why was Doug not found till almost a week later, and that this idea that I or Steve Mango could have miraculously saved him. I would have to say that's probably one of the more moronic things that I'm hearing. And it's coming from people that obviously do not live in the real world, or they don't understand how life in the big city works. Los Angeles is the second largest city in the United States. There's over 12 million people in Los Angeles. I've stated many times before that I would never call the police to do a welfare check on anyone, and I stand by those words. I would never use the police for a welfare check. If you guys have been watching all the protests going on in LA and like how incompetent the LAPD is and what they're doing, that should somewhat explain my reasoning for that. And here in Arizona, I would never call Maricopa PD to do a welfare check on anyone. And I know Zippity Doodah has a hard time comprehending that. And people have this idea and they think, you know, I would have been knocking down Doug's door and I would have rescued him. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. That's not how shit goes down. There are probably 700 Doug Kramers in the city of Los Angeles alone. Okay, that's a very common name. If you've never been to Los Angeles, there are different precincts of Los Angeles. Like I've been to Los Angeles too many times to count. It's like an 8-hour drive for me. I have flown to LA. Just to fly over Los Angeles is like about 10 to 12 minutes. That's a big ass city. Like if you've ever been in an airplane, usually you can fly over a city in like 2 to 3 minutes. It's like 10 minutes to fly over Los Angeles. It's freaking massive. And no, we were not going to call Jeff Augustine because, first of all, we do not like Jeff Augustine, and Jeff Augustine couldn't even figure out where ZDT lived. And that further proves my point. ZDT has a very common name. His name is Anthony, and his last name is an extremely popular Italian last name. He probably has what is the equivalent of the name John Smith when it comes to Italian names. That's why Jeff Augustine couldn't, when they were trying to do that like process serving thing or whatever went down, and Jeff Augustine gave the wrong address. That's why. There's probably 700 Zero Dark Tonys in Los Angeles, you know, with his real name. If you look up Los Angeles Police Department and wellness checks, they do not do wellness checks until it has been 48 to 72 hours since your last contact with the person. They don't put priority on wellness checks either, unless if the person is a senior citizen or like an elderly, disabled human being. Then they will put a priority on a wellness check for that. But you still have to be missing for 24 to 48 hours if you're like an elderly, disabled person. People were wanting the police to be involved when it had been 10 hours since they last heard from Doug. Now think about that for a minute. Most of us go missing for 8 to 10 hours a day when we go to work. Can you imagine if people called the police and wanted the police to go check on their friend or family member because it's been 10 hours since they've heard from them? That would be a full-time job for our cops. That's all our cops would be doing. They would be doing wellness checks on people that haven't answered their phone in 10 hours. A couple of Doug's fans called the police, and they learned that lesson the hard way, because the police were like, "Who are you?" And Doug's fans were like, "Oh, well, I'm a fan of his YouTube show, and he hasn't showed up to his YouTube show like he promised." Yeah. And I'm not a fan of the cops, but the cops basically were like, yeah, we're not going to go check on someone just because it's your favorite YouTuber and they are 10 hours late for their show. Sorry. Doug's mother himself had a very difficult time getting a wellness check done by the LAPD. In fact, it almost took Doug's mother another 24 hours, and she's the mother. To get the LAPD to coincide and cooperate with 911, yeah, it took it was at least 14 hours for the ball to even get rolling on that. So yeah, and I also want to tell people, whether he was found 10 hours after he was deceased or 5 days after the fact, does it really fucking matter? He's dead. Okay, I hate to be so blunt about it, but again, what fucking difference does it make? He would have been dead at 10 hours and he would still be dead 5 days later. It's no one's fault, and there is no reason to be upset at anyone for his passing. And those of you that are upset and you think that it's someone's fault that he had a heart attack or whatever is arterial sclerosis, that's what the autopsy report said. If you are mad at that, that's pretty ignorant. Now, I did see the autopsy report. I'm not going to lie. I did find that strange about, how quickly it was released. That's honestly the quickest I've ever seen an autopsy report released. I mean, that thing was released like 10 hours after they discovered his body. The findings were arteriosclerosis, aka heart disease, clogged arteries, and it did say on the report, it said, additional findings, contributing factor, excessive cigarette smoke. I've seen people say that cigarettes were not mentioned. Yes, they were. I find it very strange that someone that says they are a medical professional is going to sit up there and say that they are flabbergasted that a 50-year-old man suddenly died from arterial sclerosis due to heavy cigarette smoking, which that actually happens to be the #1 cause of death in America to this very day, as it has been for decades. #1 cause of death, people. And as a medical professional, I'm not a medical professional, but there are people making videos, they're projection videos about Doug. And they are saying, I can't believe that. And I'm like, really? As a medical professional, you can't believe that Doug unfortunately passed away from arterial sclerosis due to heavy smoking at 50 years old. I got to ask those medical professionals where they received their medical degrees at. I'm guessing it must be the same place where Chris Shelton received his psychology degree. So moving on, people seem to forget about Doug's past. Doug had a very hard life, okay? First of all, he was raised in Scientology from, I'm not sure if it was birth, but very young childhood. Very, very young childhood at the bare minimum. He was raised in Scientology his entire life by his parents. When you're raised in Scientology, you never go to the doctor. I know myself, as someone that was raised in Scientology, I probably have been to the doctor twice throughout my entire childhood. And I remember when I became pregnant with my first daughter as a teenager, my Scientology mother let me go to the doctor one time during my entire 9 months of pregnancy. That's crazy. I look back on it now. I'm like, dude, that's batshit nuts. So yes, I went to the doctor once throughout 9 months of pregnancy, and I also had my child at home. I had a home birth. That's another story, though. So with that being said, the fact that Doug was raised with a Scientology upbringing with practically zero medical care, no doctor intervention, who knows what his underlying medical conditions were. He could have had an enlarged heart, he could have had a weakened heart, and he's sitting there at 50 years old not knowing these things. It's safe to say he's a 2-pack-a-day smoker. My father is a 2-pack-a-day smoker. Not anymore. But my father smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day for over 40 years. My father currently has the same condition that Doug does. He has heart disease. He's had it for several years now. I've almost watched my father almost die 3 times in front of my face in this last year. It's very realistic to me that one of these days my father is going to suddenly die of a heart attack, similar to Doug, and when he does, there is not going to be a damn thing I can do about it. I will not be able to save my father when that time comes, and I live with my dad 24/7. Now, I know people like Zippity Doodah like to make their little snide remarks and roll their eyes and like, oh, and I don't want to hear about how Doug, was a man who liked his privacy. Well, you know what? I do. So I don't really give a shit what Zippity Doodah thinks or what her ideas of life should be. Because she didn't like Doug. And just to throw that in there, that is a woman that did nothing but desecrate Doug's name, lie about him, and try to portray him like he is some sexual creep that's stalking her and that will not leave her alone. I think what it is she feels guilty now for treating him so horribly. That's why she's making her projection videos and going to cry about it. I'd probably do the same thing. But all I have to say is let Doug's death be a lesson on maybe treat people a little more nicely from now on instead of treating them like shit. Because you never know when somebody's going to drop dead and you're going to have that weighing on your shoulders how you treated that person. I do want to say, if people should be upset, it is known Doug did not talk to his mother for over a decade because his mother disconnected from him. There have been people that have told me that they hope Doug's mother is very upset and saddened by the fact that her son is now dead because she deserted him for 10 years. I'm kind of caught on the air on that one because, that's his mom, and it's kind of like a form of revenge to hope somebody is saddened because like their loved one passed away. So I don't know. But this is a good example of disconnection and what happens. Doug's mother disconnected from him for 10 years. She lost out on an amazing son for a decade. Over what? L. Ron Hubbard? And now she's probably coming to terms with her own mortality, and she's starting to realize, hey, I should get in contact with my son, which is what they were in the midst of doing before Doug's passing. Now, if you've ever taken any psychology courses, like developmental psychology, you get into what happens towards the end when you hit like your 60s, 70s, and 80s, and there's this whole like integrity versus despair thing. I'm not going to get into that, though. I guess people can ask Chris Shelton if they want more info, because he's the one that has the doctorate in psychology. I'm just being facetious there, but you know what I mean. Yeah, it's really heartbreaking to know that parents disconnect from their children, and then their children become adults, and then things like this happen. I do believe that life has a very strange way of teaching people lessons, and I just think this is a life lesson that the mother is going to have to learn. Doug was not a huge fan of Tony Ortega's, and neither was I, and I don't agree with her contacting Tony as the person to announce his death, but at the same time, I don't blame her, and I can see why that is, because Tony Ortega is known to the public as the man that breaks the news with all things Scientology. That's the reputation Tony Ortega has, whether we like it or not, and that's who the mother decided to contact. It is what it is, and I'm not going to cry over spilled milk. At least Tony was respectful about Doug's article, and he didn't desecrate and shit on him like how he did when Arnie Lerma died. And that's another story in itself. Now, as far as conspiracy theories of how Doug's cell phone it showed red, READ, like his messages were read 2 days before his body was found. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. You know why it said red? Because his body was found 2 days before it was publicly announced. The aunt got involved and went to the house along with the police and whatever medics, 911 first responders. Those are the people who read those messages 2 days before the news was broken about Doug's untimely death. That's why it shows that those messages were read. So there's no murder mystery theater regarding that. I'm sorry, once again, the boring facts of life. As far as Karen and Jeff murdering him, I swear, I'm used to this, though. If you guys were around when Arnie Lerma, most of you probably do not even know who Arnie Lerma is. I would say probably 50% of you watching this. Arnie Lerma was another very old-time critic who had been around a very long time, just like Mark Plummer. And when he passed away, there were conspiracy theories galore about him. I mean, it was insane. And Arnie was like family to me, very, very, very close to me. And he was an extremely good friend of Doug's as well. He was actually someone that Doug looked up to. There were even conspiracy theories going around that my young daughter was Arnie Lerma's. So there were people trying to create this conspiracy theory that the legend of Arnie is living on through my daughter, which is absolutely funny because I never had any type of sexual relationship with Arnie. He was a very good friend, and we were extremely close. just like family members are. I can get into more, but I'm not going to make this about Arnie. That's, again, something I don't really want to talk about because it already happened years ago. And what's done is done, and what needed to be said was said many years ago. I warned people when Doug passed away that this was going to happen. I warned about 4 people that were very good friends of his. I messaged them and said, hey, you guys, brace yourselves. This is what's going to happen. There are going to be a few people who freak out and turn this into a conspiracy theory. You are going to see the ugliness of society. You're going to see people that did not like Doug coming out and suddenly act like they were good friends with him. You are going to see people lie about him, and you're going to see people turn this into like murder mystery stuff and turn his death into something that it was not. And that's exactly what happened. And for some reason, we're getting like another little outburst of it recently. I don't know why that is. If there's something going on Discord, I don't use Discord. I don't go dumpster diving. That's my attitude. I think Discord can be great for like certain political things, like especially if you're into like the anarchist movement or things that are a little bit libertarianish. Discord can be a wealth of information. But when it comes to Scientology, Discord is basically a dumpster. And Chris Shelton is pretty much the head honcho of the Discord crew when it comes to the anti-Scientology movement. And that's really all I need to know, is that if Chris Shelton is the authority figure of the Discord crew, like I said, I ain't going dumpster diving in there. So I think there's some stuff going on in Discord about Doug, and that's possibly why there's this like latest hoopla about him. And people can spread this message. I don't care. The reason I'm saying it is I am somebody that has known Doug for over a decade. There are going to be people coming out of the woodwork that I've never heard of, saying that they had a relationship with Doug and that they're his girlfriend, which, I'm starting to hear rumors swirl that there's someone going around saying that. Zippity-doo-dah might believe that person, but I don't, because I know the facts, I know the truth, and yeah, there is no girlfriend of Doug's. I think what people need to do is just let Doug rest in peace. Whatever you happen to believe when someone dies, that's a personal issue. Honestly, I don't even like talking about this, but I'm just doing this for the people who genuinely cared about him and had a respect for him and his show. Doug had a real life away from YouTube. So do I. Doug had a job. So do I. These YouTube videos that we do probably make up 15% of our personal lives. This does not constitute who we are as a person, and where we just eat, breathe, and live Scientology, and we are this entertainment personality on YouTube. And certain people, by doing that, they're actually building a very unhealthy relationship with people like Doug. When you start to live vicariously through that person, and you believe you know that person, and you kind of have a break from reality versus what's going on YouTube. YouTube, this is cyberspace. This is not reality. We share our stories to educate people. And if people find our stories interesting, that's awesome. But we do have private lives, and we do have a right to privacy. So when I hear people say that this is not a private matter, oh, you bet your sweet ass it is a private matter. When somebody dies and the mother gets involved and it turns into a family situation, it is a private matter. And when the family steps in and they tell me to step off because the family is taking care of it, I step off. That's what anyone would do. What did you guys want me to do? Argue with Doug's mom and say, no, he's my friend and I have more legal rights over your son's life than you do. It's not how it goes in the real world. Now, I'm going to end off because this is already 35 minutes. I really didn't want this to go beyond 20 minutes. I hope I answer whatever questions are out there, but yes, unfortunately, heart disease is the #1 cause of death in America. Like I said, Doug lived a pretty harsh life, not recently, but throughout his past. He was homeless for several years. His family deserted him. He smoked about 2 packs a day. You take that all into consideration, and it doesn't surprise me one bit that he died at 50 years old of arterial sclerosis. In fact, I'm actually surprised that he made it that long, given the type of lifestyle that he had in his past. So yeah, that's really all that I am going to say about this for now. If people want to continue to make a murder mystery theater about this, and they don't believe it, and if you all still think that Karen and Jeff are behind it for whatever reason, like, I'm not fans of Karen and Jeff. And I've been a huge vocal opponent of theirs for many years. Now, if anyone was going to get murdered for speaking out against them, I would have been dead like 5 years ago. I used to come out publicly all the time and ask Karen why she's still auditing people, and she had me removed from like so many public anti-Scientology forums. Yeah, she did not like me. She didn't like me outing her, and she didn't like me sharing her secrets. So if anyone would be dead right now because of her, it would be me. So shit happens. You know, one final thing too is a very good friend of mine here in Phoenix, Arizona, someone I knew personally, she passed away towards the end of June. And this is someone that lived 15 minutes away from me. And I talked to her about once a week on the phone. I talk to most of my friends about once a week. That's average. Myself and all of the other friends of this person, we did not find out that she was dead until almost a week after her death. Because she lived alone. We only talked to her once a week. She was very busy. You know, when your friends have habits where you know they're always on the go, they're by themselves, they don't really talk more than once a week, you kind of respect those habits. You don't do the opposite and then start to go up your friend's ass 50 times a day and call them 50 times a day. That's not the real world. So if you take into consideration that the LAPD would not do a wellness check till 48 to 72 hours after Doug gone missing, and then a couple days after that where it actually finally happened, 5 to 7 days is about average, people. That's about average of discovering that somebody who lives by themselves is dead. That is the average. Unless if you live in a very tiny town of 200 people where everybody knows everybody. That's the facts. Yes, I'm sad that he passed away, but I'm not going to sit here and talk about him for the next 5 months and ponder over what coulda, woulda, shoulda been if he was still alive. Wherever he is, I think he's doing a hell of a lot better than where we are, stuck here on this shitty little planet right now. He's actually doing better than we are, in my opinion. He was a great man. I hope his legacy continues on with his videos, and it's great. I'm glad I was able to be a part of his life as his friend and as somebody that was, able to go on his show. Glad I was able to have a bunch of laughs with him and just get into deep conversations about life. He was a very fascinating person. Probably one of the most interesting people I've ever met. And his just craving for answers and thinking about life it's very rare. You don't meet too many people that are deep thinkers like that. And I will forever miss him. So there you have it. I'm not going to project myself and start crying about him so that people can pay attention to me and I can feel sorry for myself, because that's just not how I roll. I think Doug deserves respect, and by people making fake videos with fake tears, it's actually disrespecting him, in my opinion. That's for the zippity doodah projection style videos. Anyways, love you all. Peace and Xenu bless. No, I'm just kidding. Just hope you guys stay happy, healthy, and yeah, just be kind to one another, and I'll check you guys out. Thank you.